Yes. Good. Good fish. Whoa!
There are few more exciting moments in the world of freshwater fishing than those tense seconds which drag by as a big, bruising brown trout surges and dives just outside of netting range.
Chasing with it. Coming back now.
The sweet sensation of relief and elation when that trophy trout is at last yours, thrashing its bulk in the mesh of the net, provides a natural high which will bring the devoted back again and again to match wits with this speckled aristocrat of the Sweetwater. The very largest brown trout to be found in Australian waters live mainly in our man-made dams and impoundments. Names such as Pedder, Eucumbene and Jindabyne are synonymous with big, fast-growing and hard-fighting browns. But now another location has joined that list and is fast emerging as a 5-star producer of heavyweight browns. That place is Victoria's beautiful Lake Toolondo. For several seasons, the exceptional fishing available in this scenic, tree-studded lake remained a well-kept local secret. But by 1985, the news of big bags and record-sized fish had begun to filter out. Soon, Toolondo's magnetic attractions began drawing keen anglers from all over Victoria, South Australia and southern New South Wales to this picturesque corner of the Garden State's Wimmera district. Lying as it does just 4 to 5 hours comfortable drive from Melbourne and less than 6 hours from Adelaide, Lake Toolondo represents a perfect weekend or holiday destination for the freshwater angler seeking greener pastures, away from the hard-fished waters and clamouring crowds of better-known lakes and streams. There is an appealing freshness and vitality about Toolondo, a feeling that its best days are still to come, rather than already the fading memories of old-timers. Perhaps it is this quality, combined with a certain knowledge that monster trout haunt these waters, which is attracting so many visitors from far and wide.
G'day, I'm Steve Starling, and this is Lake Toolondo in the Wimmera district of northwestern Victoria, about half an hour out of the township of Horsham. This man-made reservoir was formed in the early 1950s with the damming of an existing swamp system. In its early years, it was one of the best redfin fisheries in this state, but in 1982 it was stocked with large quantities of brown trout from the Snobs Creek hatchery here in Victoria. And since that time, it's quickly emerged as one of the best brown trout fisheries in the state. And in fact, it wouldn't be too far off the mark to say that at this point in time, it's probably the best impoundment trout fishery in mainland Australia. It's producing a lot of big fish, a lot of 2 and 3 kilo fish, and just generally a very good run of brown trout. I've come here at the invitation of a couple of the locals, in particular Laurie Liston and Dennis Jeffs, to fish for these brown trout with them using their techniques, which mainly centre around the use of bubble floats and mud eyes. We'll be using a few other techniques throughout this session as well. I'm just about to head out onto the lake now to try and find Laurie and Dennis, so come along with us and we'll see if we can catch a few of these fighting browns of Lake Toolondo.
Despite being just 4 kilometres long and roughly 3.5 kilometres across, the many backwaters, secret nooks and tree-shrouded arms of Lake Toolondo offer a multitude of potential fishing spots and a virtual lifetime of discovery for the visiting angler.
Savage Gannett calling Savage Ranger. Savage Gannett calling Savage Ranger. Are you on the air, Dennis?
Good morning, Steve. Good to hear from you.
G'day, mate. Yeah, I've just launched the boat and I'm out on the main body of the lake now. Whereabouts are you, Dennis?
We're over in the northeast corner, Steve. The fishing's a bit spasmodic, but by all means come on over.
Oh, very good. Have you got one in the keeper yet?
Only a modest-sized one.
All right, mate. Well, we'll see if we can improve on that. I know pretty well where you are. I'm only a minute or two out from there. I'll come straight in.
Catch you shortly. Over.
Hey Laurie, Dennis, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, what a beautiful day, eh?
Beautiful.
This is this Wimmera weather they've been telling me about, eh? Oh, it's great.
Sunny Toolondo.
Fishing a bit quiet, is it?
Extremely so.
Oh, we might have to have a move somewhere else, eh? It might be a bit sunny up here.
the prolific stands of down timber which fill at least half of this lake present obvious hazards to navigation, the careful and observant operator will quickly learn to recognize the deeper areas and drowned creek beds amongst the trees. With so much fish holding cover to choose from, selecting an area in which to begin fishing can be a confusing task. A depth sounder can play a vital role here, not only in identifying the drop-offs and submerged weed beds adjacent to snags which produce so many trout, but also by revealing the fish themselves as they hang suspended above the food-rich bottom strata. However, anglers without such sophisticated equipment need not despair. The density of fish here in Toolondo is such that most likely-looking stretches are almost sure to contain at least a few quality specimens. And if half an hour or so of effort fails to produce, there's always another prime location to be found just a short distance away. In this case, however, our anglers have chosen their spot well, and within a few minutes of casting their lines, a float jiggles, dips and vanishes beneath the mirror-calm surface. 10 seconds pass as the fish moves off slowly with the tasty morsel. Then, trembling with barely suppressed excitement, the lucky fisherman engages his reel's bail arm, cranks slack from the line, and strikes. The reward is a powerful pull on the rod and a surge of line from the spool as one of Toolondo's fighting fit brown trout feels the hook and lunges away, twisting and turning through the water towards the sanctuary of the weed beds and tangles of submerged branches deep below. Toolondo browns are widely renowned for their strength, their tenacity, and their propensity for taking to the air in spectacular leaps and tail walks. This active performance is hardly surprising in light of the fish's superb condition. These brown trout have among the fastest growth rates yet recorded on mainland Australia, and it is rare indeed to take a Toolondo fish in anything other than the peak of fitness. Few other waterways are currently producing as many brown trout of such a high average weight as Lake Toolondo. Here, a typical fish will weigh between 1 and 1.5 kilograms, with 2 kilo specimens barely raising an eyebrow among the locals, who don't regard their browns as big until they top the 3 kilo mark. This prolific lake has already turned up several enormous trout. These have included once-in-a-lifetime trophies weighing as much as 6 and 7 kilograms. It is almost certain that even heavier trout than these leviathans will be taken in coming years as this phenomenal body of water attains its peak balance between fish stocks and food supply.
Yes.
Take too long, did it?
Well done.
One local fisherman who knows and loves Toolondo better than most is grazier and caravan park proprietor Laurie Liston. During a quieter moment in his week-long visit to Toolondo, fishing writer Steve Starling talked to Laurie about his 3.5 decades of experience here in the shadow of his beloved Grampians.
Laurie, you've been living here since about 1950, so I guess you were here when this was, well, what was it before it was Lake Toolondo?
It was just three little swamps it was before it was Toolondo.
And they built it, it started to fill in 53. And
It started to fill in 53 and the trees sort of died out around 55 level. That's why we've got all the dead trees out there.
And there were fish in it then?
We believe so. Redfin right through that period. Goes back to settlement as far as we know.
But the first actual deliberate liberations of trout were when?
1982, the first fisheries liberation of trout with this water was in 1982.
And how many did they put in then?
Around 120,000.
Nearly all browns?
Nearly all browns, about 4,000 rainbows, all bits of browns.
And since then they've, stocked it every year?
They've stocked it every year, around 50,000. It's averaged 50,000 every year, good thing like trout.
And how big are they when they go?
All around the 6-inch mark. Some a bit bigger, some a bit smaller.
It should be a pretty good survival rate at that size, wouldn't there?
Oh, well, it should be magnificent. The clubs liberate them over the weed beds, which certainly should help this.
And what about growth rates?
Well, the growth rate is believed to be phenomenal by all the researchers. Well, from the fishermen themselves, we've seen the growth rates, the fish grow to a pound in probably 6 months.
Fair dinkum. Yeah, that's great. So these 3/4 pound fish that we've caught a fair few of, how long have they been in?
They've been in since about July, August. The last have been August, the earliest of them around May.
So just 4 or 5 months and they've grown to quite a nice pan size.
Yeah, 4 or 5 months they've come up to this.
Yeah. And that condition, they've all been in superb condition. Every fish we've caught's been in great condition. That's pretty much typical of the fish in here?
Typical, very typical. The big fish though show exactly the same sort of magnificent growth rate as what the small fish do. They all look beautiful.
What are they eating to whack on the weight so quick, you reckon?
Well, the bulk of them are fully abbies when you catch them. You get the damsel fly, they've got mud-eye, gudgeon and whitebait.
Right.
Seems to be the major food.
There's just heaps and heaps of food in here. I can't believe it. You know, that they should keep growing like that forever by the looks of it.
It seems that the wood growth in the lake and the weed growth seems to produce enormous abundance of food, just natural food.
Well, they're not feeding real well right here at the moment. Do you reckon we should up lines and move?
I think we should up lines and move.
You're a believer in sort of not spending too long in the one spot, aren't you?
Well, it's obvious that if the fish aren't biting, they're not there. So you've just got to move.
So it's a good idea to sort of just give a spot 5 or 10 minutes, then wind in and go and have a look somewhere else.
Probably a bit longer than that. Yeah,
20 minutes.
20 minutes, half an hour.
Right.
We move either way.
Well, let's do it.
Okay.
One of the most attractive aspects of a relatively small impoundment such as Toolondo is the ease with which locations can be checked out and new areas tried. Often, if fish are not biting at one end of the lake or wind conditions are unfavourable, a quick run to the far shore will turn the odds in the angler's favour.
Yeah, you have to.
Today is no exception, and Laurie and Steve quickly locate a patch of fish feeding in 4 metres of water over a dense bed of weed in one of the lake's many bays. It is worth remembering that apart from the hottest periods of mid to late summer, most of the trout in Toolondo will feed in water ranging from 1 to 5 metres in depth. The emphasis should always be on shallower areas at dawn, dusk, and during overcast or very windy weather, and towards slightly deeper stretches during the day and when glassy conditions prevail.
Heavier than he looked. Probably weigh as much as that other one, it's just in better condition. Oh, the hook fell out too.
have your head on, it'll go away on you.
Yes!
This will go jump.
He is too, he's up high in the water.
Hey, either that or he's coming straight at us.
He's coming. Can't not turn it a fish. We're killing it. All of the techniques that take trout in Australia will take them here in Toolondo, but a few shine above all the others. Especially the use of live mud eyes, either under a bubble float or under a quill float. You have to use a float in most places in the lake to keep the mud eye suspended above all the weed that's on the bottom. And it seems to pay off to have the mud eye as close to that weed as you can get it, most of the time anyway, without snagging up in it. And that can be anything between 1 metre and say 3 or 4 metres underneath the float, just depending on the part of the lake that you're fishing in. But mud eyes aren't the full story. A lot of fish are taken in here on lures, things like this little spinner and various spoons and so on, either cast and retrieved or trolled along behind a boat with or without some weight on the line. You don't have to have a boat to fish this lake. We've been talking mainly about boat fishing, and whilst it certainly is a big advantage, I think, because of all the timber and so on to operate from a boat, there's some very good bank fishing to be had, especially by the fly fishermen, who at times enjoy superb sport early in the morning and late in the afternoon on some of the grassier banks that are present around the lake. You can also bait fish off those banks and cast and retrieve lures, so you don't have to have a boat to come up here, although I'd say that a boat of some sort would definitely increase your likelihood of taking a good catch of fish. We've been talking a lot about mud eyes as bait, and they certainly are the best trout bait in this lake, I think, and in a lot of lakes actually. Some people are probably wondering what mud eyes are. Oh. These little critters are mud eyes. They're the larval stage of the common dragonfly, the fella you see buzzing around over ponds and lakes everywhere. What those dragonflies are doing when they're flying around over the water is laying eggs. They drop their eggs into the water and they sink to the bottom, hatch out and become these mud eyes, these larval stage of the dragonfly. And they spend quite a part of their life cycle in this form, crawling around on the bottom of the lake or whatever. And eventually, they, when they grow into a certain point, they climb up onto an exposed branch or onto a reed, and their shell cracks, and out comes the dragonfly, dries his wings and flies away. But while they're in this condition, they're one of the best trout baits you can possibly get. As long as they're alive, they're pretty well useless once they die, but you can keep them alive for a long time if you keep them in nice cool water with some bits of bark and so on in there for them to crawl around on. Don't let them get too warm. If they don't die, they'll turn into dragonflies and your bait will fly away. So that's the mud eye. Well, here we are out on Lake Toolondo, and as you can see, it's a beautiful day. In fact, it's probably a little bit too calm and sunny and bright for the best of trout fishing, but we're still going to give it a go. Because of the conditions, we've chosen an area with a drop-off from shallow weed beds with barely any water over them at all into about 5 or 6 metres of water. It drops off fairly suddenly, and this is a proven location for big trout especially to be feeding. So we've anchored up with our anchor in the weed beds and we've drifted back over the drop-off. And the techniques that we're using is to fish mud eyes under both bubble floats and quill floats. We're fishing them about 3 or 4 metres deep today to get them down just above that weed bed where the trout are likely to be when it's so calm and clear. And we're fishing with our bail arms open and with the line greased so that when the trout picks up the mud eye and moves away, there's absolutely no resistance at all and nothing to cause the trout to spit the bait out. Earlier I mentioned the fact that we grease our lines so that they float on the surface of the water. I'm just about to re-grease mine now because I've been using it for a day or two and the line floatant's worn off and the line started to sink. I use this silicone mucilin, but there's a variety of products on the market that you can use, and in fact you can even just use ordinary mutton fat or Vaseline to grease the line so that it doesn't sink. We do that so that you don't end up with a big belly of line hanging down in the water between your rod tip and the float. If you've got that and a fish takes the bait, there's a fair bit of line drag, and also that line hanging down can catch up in the weed and so on. So you've got a lot better contact with your float and therefore a lot better contact with the bait and the fish that takes that bait if your line's greased. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this on my fingertips now. And as I wind in, I'll just hold that and just run the line through it as I come in. It's not a bad idea to do this once or twice a day, especially if you notice your lines start to sink. And there we go. If you want to be really thorough, you can just run a little bit of it all the way up to the float. Obviously you don't grease the line below the float because you want that line to sink. You can see my rod's about 3 metres long and the dropper that I'm using is another metre or so longer than the rod, so I'm fishing about 4 metres deep, and there's the mud eye. Just hook lightly through the wing case. I've got a little bit of lead there just to take it straight down. A lot of people that fish with the bubble floats especially, and particularly on a calm day like this, don't worry about any lead. They just let the mud eye swim around. These mud eyes have got jet propulsion. They take water in and squirt it out, and they can actually swim around quite actively, and they're more likely to be taken by a trout if they are swimming around like that. Okay, we'll just cast this one out again. And the waiting game continues.
Of course, the use of float-suspended baits such as mud eyes, gudgeons and yabbies is just one of many proven trout-taking techniques which can be used on an impoundment such as Toolondo. Trolling lures or natural baits behind a slowly moving boat will catch brown trout here just as in most other Australian lakes and dams stocked with these fish. Favourite lures at Toolondo include the Tasmanian devil or Wigston style of artificial, as well as the evergreen and time-proven flatfish pattern. Spinning-bladed lures such as Selters, Meps, Ondex and Jensens also have their days, as do diving minnows, spoons and streamer flies. All of these artificials may be fished either on an unadorned flat line, straight from the rod, or behind a flashing attractor such as a multi-bladed cowbell or Ford fender. Cowbells and Ford fenders also work extremely well in lakes like Toolondo when teamed with a carefully rigged and presented natural bait such as mud-eye, gudgeon, earthworm or scrubworm. The trick when using these flasher and bait combinations is to troll as slowly as possible. The blades of the cowbell or Ford fender should be just rotating. Some boats will need to employ a smaller auxiliary motor, or perhaps one of the silent and deadly new breed of battery-powered electric outboards in order to achieve this. Of course, good old-fashioned oar power offers another viable alternative, as well as plenty of exercise. Casting and retrieving lures from a moored or drifting boat provides yet another option for the thinking angler. And this approach can easily be combined with the more conventional mud-eye and float technique. Wild, windy days, overcast weather, and stormy evenings are most likely to turn on the best action for spin fishermen. though much exciting work remains to be done after dark, using surface lures such as fish cakes and jitterbugs, which fuss and bubble across the surface to imitate a frog or large insect. Yet it is to the bubble, float and quill that most of Toolondo's really successful proponents ultimately return. To them, float fishing mud-eye offers just the right mix of relaxation, thrills and consistent results. Certainly, on a year-round basis, no other fishing method comes close to producing the bags of beautiful brown trout which fall to the mud-eye and float specialists. Of course, even a top-class fishery such as Toolondo has its down days and quiet spells. However, here, the natural charm of this timber-clad wetland, with its teeming wildlife, offer at least some consolation to the angler who finds fish hard to tempt. The middle of a long, hot summer's day rarely provides the best in fishing, and Toolondo is no exception, especially when the breeze falls away and the water glasses off like a giant silver mirror. These are the moments to enjoy the cool wind on your face as you run at speed across open water, soaking up the scenery, or perhaps choosing a site for a well-earned lunch break and siesta.
Well, there's a couple of lovely Toolondo browns. They're both just over the kilo mark, and at that weight I guess they're about average for the fish that are coming out of this lake at the moment. I've just finished cleaning them. We caught them a couple of hours ago and put them on ice in the esky because it's a pretty warm day, and they're going to be beautiful. Number of ways you can prepare trout for the table, obviously. Some people like them smoked. Some people, especially with fish this size, would wrap them in alfoil and bake them whole. That's a delicious way to eat trout. But we're going to take the fillets off these so that we can cook them up nice and quick on the barbecue, have some lunch and get back out there and catch a few more. Beautiful orange flesh, these fish. The smaller ones we've been catching are even brighter, pinky orange. Obviously got a great diet. You'd pay a fortune for this kind of fresh trout in a city restaurant. And it wouldn't be as fresh as these blokes. They were on the end of our line about 3 hours ago. Once I've filleted them, I'm going to take the skin off them. You don't even have to worry about scaling them if you do this. The skin comes off pretty easy. You just hang on to the skin. Good trick is just to hold the knife still, saw backwards and forwards holding onto the skin. You don't waste any flesh this way. And then there's a few bones left up around this rib area. You can just slice under them. You come up with a beautiful piece of flesh like that with no bones left in it, and that is going to be delicious. There we go, lovely piece of freshly cooked Toolondo brown trout. I've already had a couple of meals of this fish and I know just how nice it is. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into this piece. This is a beautiful way to spend the middle of the day. The fishing's gone a little bit quiet now, so we've come in, filleted our fish and barbecued them here on the barbecues that are provided around the foreshores. And as soon as I'm finished it, I'm going to get back out there and try and catch a couple more as the sun gets a little bit lower. So just excuse me now while I get stuck into this superb trout.
By mid-afternoon, as shadows begin to form amongst the timber and the temperature slowly falls, fishing once more becomes an attractive prospect, particularly in the deeper alleys between stands of trees. Here, fish often begin to move and rise to hatching insects much earlier than one might expect.
Oh, did you see that? One just rose right behind my float.
Yeah.
The float's gone down, I got it. Take line. Got him.
Oh, terrific!
A bit of weight there too.
Yeah.
Often, these rising fish will readily accept a float-fished mud-eye, particularly if the rig is cast gently and allowed to drift within their sight range.
Coming all the way to you. Nail out of the water. Now hit him.
Oh, I don't think I'm going to actually feel a fish on.
Leading in a little bit.
Pretty well done now.
Lovely. Want a nice one?
Certainly is. Beautiful fish.
At times such as this, when fish begin to move actively, the action can come in sharp bursts, with several big browns being hooked within minutes of each other.
Take it or see
Yeah,
it.
sorry.
You struck it quick. Oh, yes, what a beauty. They're a bit deceiving at first. You think you've got a small one on.
This guy's beautiful. Missed it. Right. Terrific. Taking each other.
Let's see who's biggest.
Oh, put it down.
Well done.
That's
Fair
right.
play. Got it well down too.
However, after such a hectic rush of activity, it is not unusual for a spot to suddenly go quiet. This could be a result of the hooked fish spooking others from the area, or it may simply indicate that this particular group of fish have moved on to another feeding station. Whatever the case, it doesn't pay to persist for too long after the action ceases. Better to move and try another location in the hope of finding some more trout in a feeding mood. This pattern of locating fish, hooking a couple, shifting when necessary, and constantly searching out trout-holding water is one of the hallmarks of successful lake anglers. But so too is knowing the right gear to use and understanding how to get the very best from it.
I'm just going to run through the various rigs and fishing techniques that are used to take these brown trout here in Lake Tolondo. First of all, we'll have a look at the bait fishing rigs, which mainly revolve around the use of mud eyes and sometimes little gudgeons and small yabbies. In nearly every case,
we use a fairly small hook, about a 12 or a 10 or at largest an 8. You don't need any bigger hook than that. Even though trout have got a fairly big mouth, that's really all you want, otherwise it'll be too obtrusive in the bait. So we stick with those little hooks. Line should be kept as light as possible, but not too light, because there's a lot of timber in this lake and a big trout will take you around it. So 2 to 3 kilo is about right. I wouldn't go any lighter than 2 kilo line. As far as rods go, 2 to 3 metre fairly soft action, slow taper rods are very popular, and for good reason. They certainly make it easy to control the bubble floats, and also they're very forgiving when you do hook a large fish. Now, the most popular rig of all for these Toolondo browns would be the bubble float rig. It involves the use of one of these hard plastic, or you can get a soft rubber bubble float as well. They can be partially filled with water. The idea is to fill them so that they just float, and they provide a casting weight for you, but when they land they float. Now the line runs freely through the middle of that, and you rig it with a stopper of some sort below. Now in this case we've rigged it with a small swivel, but you can use a piece of bicycle valve rubber or a split shot or whatever as your stopper below it. And the preferred rig is to have no stopper at all above the float, so that it just runs freely on the line. Now how far you set your bait below that is very dependent on how the fish are feeding and what part of the lake that you're fishing in. 1, 2, 3 metres, somewhere in that range, and it's worth changing it a few times during the day just to find out which level they are feeding at. About 1.5 metres isn't a bad position to start at. Now because that's running freely through the float, it will sink through the float a bit. In very calm water, that'll slowly run through the float, and that mud eye will get closer and closer to the bottom. In faster flowing water, or where there's a bit of wind and so on, and a bit of boat movement, that'll hang back from the boat, and the mud eye will actually start to ride up in the water. The swivel or stopper will always be hard against the float, so you might need to just crimp a split shot on down near the hook somewhere. So that's your bubble float rig. Now another rig that does very much the same thing as the bubble float, just does it a little bit differently, is a quill float. These will be fairly familiar to saltwater anglers chasing garfish and luderick and so on. It's just a small stem float like that, very lightweight, and it's rigged on the line using rubber bands or a little piece of rubber tubing or insulation off wire, so that the line is attached to it, but this can slide fairly freely on the line, not too freely so that it moves up and down on its own, but so you can pull the line through it and adjust the depth. Now it's very important when you use a quill float that you use enough weight underneath it in the form of split shots or small ball sinkers or little pieces of sheet lead crimped onto the line to cock that float up in the water, make it stand up, and to sink it until just the end inch or so, or 2 or 3 centimetres if you like, of the float is exposed from the water. Now, if any more than that is exposed, there's going to be some resistance when the fish takes the bait, and it's going to be a little bit hard for him to pull the float underwater. So the less you've got showing, the less resistance there'll be when he takes it, and the more chance there is that you'll hook him up. They usually paint it a nice bright colour on the end so that you can see it even if there is only a small bit of your float sticking out. But once again, fish 1, 2 or 3 metres deep, just depending on where you are and how the fish are feeding. Sometimes you can even go 4 and 5 metres deep. That gets a little bit hard to cast though, so you can slide that up and down. Now, an interesting twist on this fishing mud eyes is one that Dennis Jeffs has been using to great effect of late, and that's to use a basic fly fishing outfit with, say, a number 6 or 7 weight line, floating line. It doesn't matter if it's double taper or weight forward. You can just use your fly fishing outfit that you'd be using for fly fishing off the shore here in the evenings and in the early morning. But instead of rigging it with a fly, let's leave your tapered leader on, tie the little number 12 or number 10 hook that we've been talking about to the end of it, put a small piece of cork, this is just a cork out of a wine bottle, you just slice a piece off, make a little cut in it with a very sharp knife or a razor blade, and you pull your line into that, and that grabs onto the line. Then you can slide the cork up and down the line, moves fairly freely, but once again not so freely that it's just going to slide up and down on its own. You can set that cork wherever you like. Actually, not a very good place to set it is right at the end of the fly line where it joins the leader, and that usually gives you about 8 or 9 feet of line below the cork. Don't worry about putting any weight on that unless there's a lot of wind or a lot of boat movement. And you just flick that out the back of the boat, just a few feet out the back, and just pull some fly line off and just flick it out. And the nice thing about it is the fly line floats on the surface, and it's very visible, you can see it. It moves around a lot as the boat yaws backwards and forwards. The fly line wanders about. It covers the water nicely. You don't put this one back too far or it might tangle up with your other lines, but it's a very effective way of fishing that zone between, say, 2 metres and 10 metres back from the transom, where you do actually take a lot of strikes when you're fishing mud eyes for trout. And for some reason, this outfit, this technique of fishing mud eyes seems to work on those days when they're being very, very timid about how they take the bait, and where your quill floats are barely moving or your bubbles are barely moving and the fish are rejecting the bait. A lot of times those same fish will take this one much more positively. And lastly, I always like to keep a rigged spin rod in the boat. My personal preference is for a fairly short one, but there's no reason why you can't use one of the rods we've just looked at for your spin rod. I think you've got more control when you're casting a lure if you stay down around the 1.8 to 2 metre length with your rod. Maybe a little bit heavier line, 3 kilo line, spinners and spoons and so on. It's just nice to have that in the boat. While you've got your baits out, you can flick this around, fire it at a few snags, and often you'll pull a nice fish on that as well. And of course you can troll it when you're moving from spot to spot. So that's about it. That's the rigs that account for 95% of the fish in this lake.
None of the skills needed to use lake trouting tackle are difficult to master, nor is the gear itself overly sophisticated or complex. Everyone can enjoy this fantastic sport, regardless of age, sex, manual dexterity, or physical fitness. Lake trout fishing is a wonderfully complete and entertaining form of angling, combining the best of our great Australian outdoors with the stimulating pursuit of these handsome, tasty fish. Novice or pro, holiday hopeful or 4-time-a-week addict, big water trouting will captivate your imagination, expand your horizons, and sometimes set your pulse racing. But above all else, it will hook you as firmly as any fish that ever swallowed a bait.
Just having a quick last cast. I'm afraid this great trip's come to an end. We've had some fantastic days here at Toolondo. The weather's been beautiful. Fishing's been, I think, exceptional. We've had a couple of times when we've had to work fairly hard for our fish, but every day we've taken a good bag of fish. And compared to the trout fishing I've done all over the country and even in other parts of the world, I'd have to rate this as amongst the very, very best, especially considering the quality of the fish that are coming out of Toolondo right now. I can't wait until I come back next time, and I hope I see you here then too. See you later.